Hey everybody, welcome back. We're here today with an update to the NVIDIA app, the beta. There's some really interesting things that they've done. They've added automatic rollback of drivers. They've added some interesting things to the global and program settings that replace some of the settings in NVIDIA Control Panel. There is now also one-click GPU tuning and some interesting changes to the NVIDIA overlay. So stick around, let's talk about it. So the first thing is you don't have to log in to use the app. That's kind of a nice change from the GeForce Experience days. It used to be kind of annoying to have to log in to use it. You don't have to log in to use the NVIDIA app beta. Now, the first thing you're going to see here are drivers over here on the left-hand side. I've got my latest 565.90 driver installed, and you can select over here which type of driver you want, Game Ready driver, Studio driver, and you can do the install process. They have a feature now for automatic rollback of drivers. Now, I'm not able to demonstrate that for you right now or show you where the button is because I did a clean install of the app. So as far as this app is concerned, this is the first driver I've used, so I can't roll back to anything. But when the next driver comes out and I update it, there's going to be a button on this screen at the bottom to automatically roll back the driver if you don't like what you get. So if you are somebody who doesn't like updating drivers because you're worried about having to roll it back if the results are not good for your system, that's a really huge improvement. Second up, we have graphics. Now there are two submenus here, program settings and global settings. We'll take a quick look at the global settings first. You can see here RTX Dynamic Vibrance. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I've talked about that in previous videos on the NVIDIA app beta. Basically what it does, it's a really simple way of giving a bit more life to the scene, to the visuals in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It gives you just a little bit of a brighter, kind of more alive looking picture. It's very well named because it looks more vibrant. It makes everything look a little bit more vibrant in the sim. Very simple to use. I'll show you how to use that. So this is my GPU, and this is DSR factors. Now, this is one of the things I talk about in my Holy Grail video. If you're not familiar with DSR factors, so DLDSR, this is DL, this deep learning, DSR, dynamic super resolution. So this is deep learning dynamic super resolution. DLDSR is, it basically scales up the image on your screen either 1.78 times the size of your native screen resolution or 2.25 times the size of your native screen resolution, and then shrinks that image back down to fit your screen. So my native resolution on this screen is 2K. So it's 2160 by 1440. Now, the 1.78 increase makes it 3413 times 1920. 2.25 makes it 3840 times 2160. So this is essentially 2.25 times 2K is 4.5K. So this 2.25 is slightly higher resolution than standard 4K. So what it does, if you enable this 2.25 setting in your system, and I'll show you how to do it in the sim, it increases your resolution to higher than 4K for my 2K monitor, and then shrinks that image back down to fit my screen. So the result is you have much better, clearer graphics, and it's using your GPU. And as you guys know, we are CPU limited in the sim. So what you're doing here is you're getting access to the inactive portion of your GPU performance. It's just sitting there doing nothing because your CPU is maxed out. So this is really, really cool stuff. You can do it through NVIDIA Control Panel. Easier to do it here through the NVIDIA app. So you select these two settings to be able to turn them on in the sim, and we'll talk about that again when we get into the sim. The other thing about DSR is there's the smoothness, DSR smoothness slider here at the bottom. It is not smoothness, it is sharpness. I don't know why they call it smoothness, but they do, but it's actually sharpness. The standard value for this when you turn it on is 33%. I have found for my particular taste 60% is what I like. You can play with that, but I would suggest either 33, which is the standard number, or try 60%, see what you like. We'll talk about that again soon. Now they've got other things like image scaling, low latency mode. You can set a max frame rate, G-Sync compatible monitor, what your monitor technology is, power management mode, normal, max performance, shader cache size, and V-Sync. These are all things that you can set in the NVIDIA app. And if we come over here to program settings, it'll detect all of the programs that you have that you can set your settings for. And you can set individual graphics settings for each program. I only have 2: OBS Studio, which I'm using to record this video, and Microsoft Flight Simulator. The biggest difference you'll see with the NVIDIA app and the recommendations they give you, the suggested optimized performance settings that they give you versus what they used to suggest or recommend in GeForce. As you guys know, I'm pretty dialed in terms of performance and graphics on my system. And if you look here, my settings versus the recommended settings are basically the same. I mean, they're very, very close. And whereas in the GeForce Experience days of old, my settings would be over here and the recommended settings would be over here. They'd be totally different. So they've done a much, much better job of determining what your settings ought to be. So if you're unhappy with your performance, I would suggest maybe trying the recommended values that the NVIDIA app suggests. Either take a picture or write down the settings that you have, and then try the recommended settings if there's a big difference between what you're using and what's recommended. Perhaps what's recommended is actually going to be better for you. You can see here just some slight differences in certain things, cube map reflections. The biggest things that it's suggesting to me is a different object level of detail and a different terrain level of detail. But interestingly enough, it also recommends to me to use DLDSR 2.25. So that's the suggested setting from the NVIDIA app, which is really pretty cool. The difference is I use DLAA, and they're suggesting I use DLSS performance. So that's a little bit different. But again, the settings here are very, very similar to what I actually use, the recommended settings. Come down here to the bottom. RTX Dynamic Vibrance, I'll get into that once we get into the sim here in a few minutes, but the standard settings for this are 50/50, and you can play with them. We'll play with them once we get into the sim to see what they look like, and you'll see what that's all about. DSR factors, this is what we were talking about here before. I've got it set for the global setting, which we just turned on. Low latency mode, again, max frame rate, monitor technology, etc., etc. So if you want to, you can set different settings for all of these things, not only the driver settings, but your game settings right here in the app, and you can save different settings for different apps, different games, etc. Now here we get into some really interesting stuff. So you come here to the system section. Under the overview, this is my system. When you come here to performance, what you get, and I've already done this, so I'll explain to you what it is and what I've done and what it's given me. So here it's telling you what your GPU clock is, your temperature, your voltage, blah, 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 all this stuff. To be honest with you, a lot of it doesn't mean much to me. That's neither here nor there. And what you can see here is this button that's available for automatic tuning. And what this does is it automatically tunes to find the best overclock settings for your GPU and maintains that performance on a regular basis. So earlier today, I actually did not have this on. I turned it on and it optimized my GPU settings. It took about probably 15 minutes for it to do so. I just let my computer sit. And we'll talk about the results here in a little bit. But it's a very conservative overclock, and that is what we're doing here is overclocking. But it's simple. It's literally one click. You don't have to fool around with things. You don't have to read things on internet forums. I think it's a fantastic option. And you come over here to displays. You can do certain things like change your refresh rate if you have different refresh rates available for you for your monitor. So mine, I can do 60 or 70 hertz. And then the other thing we can do is RTX video enhancements. I'll talk about that in a second. So right now what I'm going to do is get back to talking about the automatic GPU tuning. All right, so now we're done with the process. You can see what the automatic tuning has done. It has increased my GPU clock speed by 121 megahertz, and my VRAM tuning, it's increased that by 200 megahertz. So not a huge adjustment. It's a very conservative overclock, and technically that's what we're doing. That's an overclock. It's a very conservative overclock, and you know what? I like conservative overclocks. I don't want to go, to the edge of what my equipment, what my GPU is capable of. I'd rather get a little bit more performance and be on the safe side, and this is exactly what we get with this. You can set individual limits for things. You can change your your fan speed targets and your max power and voltages and things like that. I don't know a heck of a lot about it. I'm not going to do it. I think the automatic tuning is fantastic, and if you don't like the results of it for whatever reason, you can just turn it off and you're done. Very, very simple to do. You've got your displays here, and one of the interesting things you can do with the displays, first of all, you can turn G-Sync on and off, but you can also change your refresh rate if you've got a variable refresh rate monitor, if you've got different options that you can choose from. So you can choose what refresh rate you want. This here for video, this is important to understand. This is RTX video enhancements, and what this is for playback of video on things like your browser or any sort of video playback app that you're using, whatever video app you're using to watch videos, like Windows Media Player, for example. I mean, that's kind of a bad example because I don't even know if Windows Media Player is used anymore, but whatever app that you're using to watch videos, you can adjust the video enhancements of this. The video super resolution, you can turn this on, have it be auto, or you can change different settings and set them and save them. I don't mess with any of this. You can enable high dynamic range on different things. If you've got an HDR monitor, adjust the different settings here. I don't have an HDR monitor, so I can't change the settings. But again, this is just for video playback. This has nothing to do with the sim or any game that you're using. And then we come down here to the settings. There's some interesting things here. NVIDIA overlay, this is what you get when you hit Alt-Z and you get this overlay here on the side. We're going to go through that in a second. Game filters and photo mode. I know people that set up game filters and, to change different, the look of the sim basically. And there was an issue for a while that those game filters were not being saved. That has been resolved. So if you were not using the NVIDIA app because the game filters weren't being saved, that's no longer an issue. Drivers, you can choose to automatically download and install, or you can automatically download and let you choose when to install, etc., etc. I leave that alone. I just let it notify me when there's a new driver, and then I'll deal with it myself. I don't like things making changes to my computer without me being fully aware of that. So let's go into the overlay settings here real quick. Now, when we come up here into the settings, there's this gear icon here at the top. And there are your shortcut controls, which you can use to do all kinds of different things. I used to use this to record. I used to use Alt F9 all the time to turn on and off recording. I don't use that anymore. But one of the things that you can do, you can set up different profiles, game filter profiles, and set a toggle for those if you want to set up different profiles. Now, this is the one that a lot of people are going to be interested in, the toggle statistics overlay on off. That is Alt R, and we'll go over that here in a second, what those things are. Now, there's a couple of things you want to make sure are not on. One of the things you want to make sure is not on is this instant replay feature. What this does, it records in the background. You can configure how long you want the instant replay to be. So let's say you want to record the last 20 minutes of your flight, or you want to record the last 10 minutes of your flight. It will automatically do that, But what happens is it doesn't know when your flight is going to end. So it's going to continuously record your gameplay in the background, your sim session in the background, and then keep whatever the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, etc. that you want saved. The problem is when it's constantly recording in the background, it is using resources. You don't want this on. Make sure this is turned off. They've got a really easy screenshot method that I use all the time, Alt F1. All these screenshots that you see that I record in, you see in my, these are actually my thumbnails for a lot of my videos, come from these Alt F1 screenshots that I take when I'm flying. These are the game filters. So we'll go over these in a second because I don't have Microsoft Flight Simulator running. Let's look at the statistics overlay. They've got some really nice stuff that they've added to this. You come down here to the statistics, and then if you select show statistics in heads-up display, you're going to get the overlay. Now, the basic overlay, you can see it over here, is frame rate, GPU utilization, CPU utilization, and PC latency. That's the basic settings. If you click here to advanced settings, you can have all kinds of different stuff. Once again, I'll just show you here real quick. If you click here on view all, advanced, and then view all, these are all the choices that you have. You can have the ones I showed you, and you can also have GPU temperature, GPU clock, voltage, power, and you've got the two settings here for FPS. FPS frame rate, which is the one that everybody's familiar with, and FPS 1% low. Now, FPS 1% low, what it does, it shows you what your lowest 1% of FPS values are. So in other words, you could be getting, let's say, consistent 30, 45, 60. And so if you're only looking at the frame rate value, you're going to see 60 FPS or 30 FPS and think you're doing great, but you're getting kind of stuttering and pauses every once in a while, and you don't quite know what that is because your frame rates are good. That's what's happening, is you have periods of low FPS, and this is going to tell you what those low FPS periods are. If there's a big difference in these two numbers, it's something worth looking into. And now if you want to configure the heads-up display, you click here, configure heads-up display, and it's going to give you all these different options. You can move the statistics overlay around. You can put it here in the middle of the screen, you can put it on the bottom, you can put it on the left side, wherever you want it. And they've added some other really kind of neat things. So you can have it either in a line like this, you can have it stacked in different ways, you can change the font size, you can change the font color. Let's say you're in a, flying in the clouds, you're not going to see white. So you can change it to red, you can change it to green, you can change it to whatever is going to stand out on your particular screen. So now let's go into the sim and look at Dynamic Vibrance, and we'll talk about this stuff a little bit more. Here we are in Princess Juliana Airport. We've got the ATR 72. I'll show you really quick what we can do with the game filters. If you hit Alt F3, you've got four options. You've got none, you've got one, you've got two, and you've got three. So let's say we want to add RTX Dynamic Vibrance. I'm going to click here on the first profile and then click plus and add RTX Dynamic Vibrance. Now you can see when I go between one and none, there's just a slight change. This is just a little bit more bright, a little bit more dynamic. And if you click down the arrow right here, you can change the intensity and the saturation boost. Now, they are set initially at 50% each. So this is what the standard values are going to look like. So if you have none, it looks like this. It looks great, I think, but it's a little bit dull. And if you click RTX Dynamic Vibrance, if you turn on profile 1, 50 and 50%, I think that just looks more dynamic, more bright, more what I would expect it to look like in real life. If it's a little too intense for you, you can turn it down and select back and forth between no profile and profile 1, and it's going to show you what the difference is as you filter through. Unfortunately, there's a couple bugs. So if we go click the back arrow here and we're in the settings, if you want to get, these are the this is the overlay settings. In order to get here, you just click Alt Z and you'll get the overlay settings. Or if you click Alt F3 to change your filters, you just click on the back arrow here at the top of the screen. It's going to bring you back to these overlay settings. If you click on the gear icon up here for settings and then click on shortcut controls, what you should be able to do is set a toggle switch, a keybind of some kind, to toggle profile 1 on and off, profile 2 on and off, etc. Unfortunately, I can't get it to do that. I don't know if it's just me. I don't think it is. I just don't think it's working. I've tried a whole bunch of different keybinds. So what this essentially means is that when you do hit Alt F3 and change your whatever filters you have here for the different profiles, the only way you can toggle them on and off essentially is to click none and then click back on your profile, and you can see what the difference is. So you can change things, you can change your visuals and get an idea of what they look like, but it would be nice to be able to do it in flight, for example, to see what it looks like when you're over certain types of terrain or whatever. But in order to do that, you're simply going to have to hit Alt F3 and then just click back and forth. Not that big a deal, but it would be nice to be able to do it just with a key click. Again, this is a beta. I mean, it's just the kind of things that you deal with a beta. Now, in addition to RTX Dynamic Vibrance, of course, they've got a whole bunch of other different filters. In this one, I've added details and I've added color. I'm actually going to... Well, I'll leave them for now. This looks terrible. It looks ridiculous. And that's kind of my point. The reason I like RTX Dynamic Vibrance versus all these other different things, right? So they have Sharpen, they have Sharpen X Plus. Let's add Sharpen Plus. If we want to take some of the intensity out of this, and then we come here to details, which I don't even know what details really does. Change the clarity. Yeah. Sharpen the image here a little bit. Take some HDR toning out, add some bloom. My point is that once you start messing around with different filters, I think it's very, very difficult to kind of even remember what any particular setting did. So unless you kind of dig through here and learn what all these different these filters are, or you just happen upon the one that's absolutely perfect for you, I think it's pretty difficult. You start digging into these things, and I just get lost in all these different settings. The other thing is you can copy somebody else's settings. There's some great channels that do some really nice stuff about what all these settings do and how to use them most effectively. AIRNott does a wonderful job. AIRNOTT. He does a wonderful job of this type of stuff. But the problem is, even if you copy somebody else's settings that you like, if you're watching a YouTube video and you like somebody's game filters and you copy those settings exactly, they're not going to look the same on your screen as they did on that person's screen. You have a different monitor. You have, there may be other things that are influencing they may have HDR, you might not. They might have an RTX 4090 with different graphics options that you don't have, etc., etc. So I think it's pretty difficult to copy somebody else's settings. I find it difficult personally to go through all this different stuff and add all kinds of things and try to get it perfect. What I would rather do, I find the standard Microsoft Flight Simulator look good. I think it looks fine. I think it looks really nice. But if you want to spruce it up just a little bit, add dynamic vibrance, add a little, adjust the intensity as you see fit. I kind of find this 50-50. It's a little bit too bright for me, but really it's actually not too bad. So that's the way you can basically use the game filters to change the way your sim looks. I'll show you DLDSR really, really quickly. So go into general options. We spoke about this earlier. If you enable those DLDSR options, what you're going to see here in your full screen resolution, so my native screen is 2560 by 1440. Now I have options that are higher than that. This is 1.78 times my native screen resolution. This is 2.25 times my native screen resolution. And so if I enable that and click OK, it's going to take 1 second. Then I can keep the changes, apply and save, come back here to the sim, and what I have now is a much sharper image, because what I've got is essentially 2.25 times the number of pixels on my screen. They're just shrunk down to fit on the real estate that's available on my screen. So it's a much higher resolution image. If you're interested in this stuff, look up my Holy Grail video. I go into this in depth. It actually uses your GPU, that part of your GPU that you're not using. We're really maxed out on our CPUs, and our GPUs are kind of sitting around at 60%, not doing a whole lot. If you use DLDSR, you can access that extra performance from your GPU. Again, my Holy Grail video goes into that whole thing. So this is another really cool thing that you can set up using the NVIDIA app. And it's actually something that I don't use enough anymore now that I'm looking at this. This image looks amazing. So I hope this video has been useful for you guys. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, etc., please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section below. And I hope you guys are having a great day.